So, Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure, the ultimate Queen of Excess, and the reason the Eldar are so salty. And our topic for today's video, which I wanted to cover, basically, I've been reading a lot of Emperor's Children and Slaanesh novels for the upcoming Fulgrim novel that's coming out, because I'm very excited to see that. But something I've noticed repeated is how Slaanesh is portrayed is drastically less visceral, or I would say, what's a good word for it? Compelling than the other chaos corruption of other gods. And that's kind of my big pet peeve with Slaanesh, is because it has an amazing concept. Slaanesh, excess, obsession, sex, drugs, rock and roll. It's very, very, very taking things to 11. And then you read the book, and it's literally just either Emperor's Children who just go, oh, the pleasure, the pleasure, the pleasure, ooh, my pleasure. Like they're doing fucking puns. Or it's just a cultist who's just giggling. And that kind of falls short of, what Slaanesh is. I mean, one of the weakest parts of portrayal of Slaaneshi corruption is we don't have a lot of early beginner stories from that perspective. Sure, there is the heresy books that go over basically the corruption of the Legion, and that's a very different thing than the corruption of, the mortals. And that's something I like about Chaos books, is usually you'll have your main story going on, and then you'll have a POV from either a guardsman or a regular Humie going through the process of corruption. In Storm of Iron, there was a guardswoman who was captured, and we got to see her slowly fall to Khorne. And in that, we got to see, this is how you get to becoming a chaos cultist monster. And it's not even like this thing of she lost faith. It was, she slowly became more and more hatred until that hatred overwhelmed her and she, was corrupted. And there's not a lot of that with Slaanesh. Most of the time, how it will be is Slaaneshi cultists will have their surface level, the Caiaphas Cain effect on a faction, where the faction will just be the most stereotypical version of itself, which is very good for the Caiaphas Cain novels. Nothing against them. They're very good. I love them. But in the novels, when Caiaphas Cain fights Slaaneshi cultists, they are just giggling mad people who are going, oh, the pleasure I feel is amazing. And that's absolutely fine. That's great to have on cultists. It makes them uncanny. It makes them very scary. It makes them, oh my god, we can't torture these people. They're getting off on getting tortured. This is horrible. These are monstrous people who have lost themselves to desire. However, in the books where it is focused on Slaanesh as a main character and not just an adversary or a antagonist, where we are from the corrupted position, I would like it to go a little bit more in depth than just, oh, the pleasure. I feel like that's lacking, because Slaanesh is not just pleasure. And how it's used usually is Chaos Space Marines, or those corrupted by Slaanesh in a sense, are always treated as sort of arrogant assholes who never ever learn from their mistakes, and they, are so beyond themselves and so arrogant, it just never gets to them. That nothing ever gets to them. They can be getting beaten up and they'll be like, oh, the pleasure. Or they'll just get mad and they'll go, oh, well, yeah, maybe I'll get more pleasure if I beat you up. Mm-hmm. And this is just kind of annoying, because Slaanesh isn't just pleasure. Slaanesh is excess. Slaanesh is obsession. Slaanesh is an insanity. You don't need to be... Not every Slaaneshi character needs to be an aristocratic elite who speaks in a goofy voice and goes, ooh, ah, ooh, ah. Slaanesh is more than this. And of course, that's the main portrayal and the surface level thing of, oh, it's just people that like looking at their own mirror reflection and they just check themselves out all day. This is not true. Slaanesh is much, much, much worse than this. Because I fear what Games Workshop has done with Slaanesh is that they've written Sigvald, and now every single Slaaneshi character is just some degree of Sigvald. Sigvald's a great character. Self-obsessed, arrogant, oh, my beauty is unbound. But there are so many other angles we can take with this. One of my favorite things about Renegade's Lords of Excess, a novel I'm reading right now, is they have a obliterator, or he becomes eventually an obliterator, of the Emperor's children, and he is a materialist. He doesn't care about beauty, he doesn't care about anything. He cares about looking at numbers going up. He will sit down and count all of his bolt rounds. He will count all of his equipment. He is a materialist, obsessed with that. And his brothers all think he's like some stubborn fool. But his warband leader looks at him and he goes like, he's actually really important to have that desire. Because the warband's resources is all accounted for. Of course, this, they run into conflict eventually because, of course, a materialist who likes numbers versus a self-important egotist will not get along that well. My main problem, to just get to the central idea, is all the Slaaneshi characters that usually come out of novels or villains or protagonist, antagonist, they all come across as extremely one note of an aristocrat who's self-importance and full of themselves. It's like ChatGPT, give me a Slaaneshi warlord who's evil, and it will give you this every single time of, oh, his self-importance is all to him, or oh, his reflection is all, or her power is unending. It's tedium to read 3 Slaaneshi novels back to back to back and go, oh, I know this character exactly. I've read him in another novel. It's exactly the same. Space Marines usually have this problem as well with the Loyalist side, as you'll come across multiple Space Marines where they'll be like, oh yeah, this is just the same stoic little mean man. Except for Space Marines, we get extremes of ideology. With Slaanesh, it's the entire faction. So it's not like, oh, if you don't like that version of Slaanesh, you can just go to this version of Slaanesh. No. It is all that all the time. So let me give an example of what good corruption looks like, what interesting corruption looks like. And the other Chaos Gods have amazing examples of this. For this, I'm going to use an example from Lords of Silence. A Imperial Guardsman is captured by the Death Guard, and he is interrogated by the chaplain, or not the chaplain, but their version of an apothecary. And basically, he slowly becomes a poxwalker, where flesh is going off his face, where stuff is going on, and where once he kind of has this strong resilience of, I'll never join you, I'm an Imperial captain, I've served faithfully in the Guard, I've fought wars against you, and I'll keep fighting. He slowly doesn't lose the fight, he just loses the energy. He's eventually dropped off on a world to be used as cannon fodder, and he shambles forward to try to get to the Imperial lines to say, hey, I'm one of you guys, I need to let you guys know, here are these weaknesses, I need to let you know. And he gets, shot, blown up, and eventually gets a look at his reflection, and it just looks like a zombie's head. There's bones showing, the eyelids are gone, everything's horrible. And as he's looking at his reflection, he should be wanting to scream, and he does want to scream in his soul, but he just can't get the energy to do it. And by the end of the novel, he's just an emotionalist husk, a shabby walking corpse, literally, with death and decay all throughout him. He still feels all these things of shame, of all this just under the surface, but he can't get the energy to express it. He got put in such a deep depression that he cannot bring himself to even cry. He just sits there staring. That is horrifying. That is a beautiful example of corruption, and it's actually one of my... It is my favorite show of chaos corruption. It is a slow process, because throughout the entire thing, he still thinks there's a little bit of hope. There's a little bit of just, I can get through this. If I get to the right lines, I can be given the Emperor's mercy, if at worst, and I can still fight for the Emperor. But by the end of the novel, He's just given up. And he's fallen in despair. And the only thing left for him is the embrace of Grandfather Nurgle. And that's fantastic. Another great example would be in the Ahriman books. There is a planetary governor which Ahriman basically abducts from his planet after destroying it. And he walks around the Thousand Sun ship, and every single day he slowly mutates a little more until his fingers are a foot long each, and he's crawling more bestial than man. And he changes so much every single day, he can't recognize himself, and he's just scared all the time. And he's looking in the mirror, and he slowly falls to insanity. And that's also a really good thing of corruption, of nothing is certain, I can't be certain. If I'm gonna look the same tomorrow, I need to figure out some way, I need to plan something, I need to get, be proactive in my life. But he can't, because his actions are ultimately futile, because the Thousand Suns are looking over him all the time. However, with Slaanesh, there's kind of only two stories. The first one is, I was a noble, I used to do a lot of dinner parties, and I got a little bit too excited at them. The second one is, I sacrificed my world and killed my planet, and now a warband abducted me, and now I'm a super cool wizard. For some reason, that story has been repeated in two separate novels. The first one is Babby's Bile, and the other one is Lords of Excess, where they both have these girls that basically killed everything that was once valuable to them, or things that were supposed to be, they were forced into a marriage, and then they killed everyone involved, and then a warband picked them up, and now they're super respected among their warband, or at least they're seen as pseudo equals. And that will be it for the generalized corruption stories. Of course, you have individual characters and how they fall to corruption, but those are special case-to-case basis. For just filler on, hey, Slaaneshi corruption can get you this way, and this way, it's only can get you two ways, which is very disheartening to me, because Slaaneshi corruption should be the most, subtle of the bunch. Here. I made up a story really quick, just to show what a good Slaaneshi corruption story can be, and it kind of falls under, the noble and he does this, but it's different. Let me just tell you. So, there's a chef named Jim Bob, and he is a very good chef on his world. He loves cooking, he makes it a very good pastime, and he even gets a career out of it. It is something that he takes a lot of pride in. It is something that he is good at. We're talking, he is doing, beautiful masterwork in the kitchen. And he eventually hits his cap. And, well, most chefs would go, oh, I've hit the top, I can do good, open a couple restaurants, have a good family time, and just kind of expand through that. Jim Bob is more in for the challenge of it. So he goes and starts looking for more spices. Some of, the darker markets, he's going to go search for that. And he finds a group that is yeah, we can get you some exotic spices from ye old sector over. Makes your tongue a little flavory, it does all this. Anyway, so he does that, and he likes the group, and it's great. Tastes delicious, and he, experiences something a little better. So, of course, he goes back and asks for more. And he does. And, he cooks really well, and the group, says, Jim Bob, you're such a great chef, why don't you come cook for us? We're having an event, and we'd love to have you and your skills. Jim Bob is, stricken by pride. Of course, a group that I like is sending out invites. Of course, that should be awesome. And, they little eccentric group, but who really isn't when they're, into their own hobbies. They all have their things that they're very proud of, and he's excited to be in a group that, takes his thoughts so seriously and his desires so seriously. And, he keeps doing events, he keeps doing stuff, and this can be over the course of months or years. And eventually, he's like, okay, let's make it a little spice a day. So let's see what we can do. So he decides to feed them fish that's still alive on the plate when it gets to the table. That's a little weird, but okay. And the group, they love it, and he feels a little bad about the fish. He's like, oh, maybe that wasn't super nice. So he, feels bad. He goes home, but when he gets back to the group, they all praise his idea and think it's the best thing ever. They thought, oh, the creativity, the art of it, it's very good. So he decides to do a couple more of those, and eventually he thinks, you know what, let's go a little bigger. So he gets a deer, or a deer equivalent in 40k, maybe a deer but spelled D-E-E-E-R. Anyway, he does that, and he keeps the deer alive until it hits the floor. And that's kind of a little bad. He does feel bad for the deer. It's kind of screaming and getting cooked alive, but, you know, it's really, you know, the voices around him of the rest of the group think it's very artful, it's very creative, it's a very show of the pain of life means something, or something. Jim Bob doesn't really know, but he's gonna let if the group loves it, he loves it. It's good, and, you know, he got to learn something new. And eventually, he starts going to the group more and more often, and he starts cooking things differently each time. And he starts feeling guilty about the animals, and his group goes, no, it's just fine. And, you know, maybe one of the group even comes up to him and says, you know, Jim Bob, you're such a good chef. Why don't we try something really artistic? Why don't we try something really unique? I don't like my hand, let's cook that up for dinner tonight. And, you know, at first he's like, oh my god, this is weird, but he thinks on it, and he starts to wonder, how would I prepare that? How would I go about getting something like that cooked? Would I bake it? Would I saute it? What ways would I put it together? And he would eventually do it. And he would get praise for it by everyone, and he would go home and he would just feel guilt. He would feel so awful. And he would start spending more and more time with the group and less time at home. As when he's at home, when he's away from this group, he feels horrible. But when he's with the group, he's a mile high. He can't get any better. He's praised all the time. It's the best thing ever. He's surrounded by intellectuals like himself that understand him, that they really get him. So eventually he stops going home. His family doesn't know where he's gone. And he's cooking for them now permanently. And that's when the real Slaanesh stuff starts. His family may eventually come to look for him, and, well, Jim Bob may give new meaning to family style. But in essence, there was no sexual aspect to that side. And I feel like that's what a lot of authors fear when they're writing for Slaanesh, is that you have to have a sexual or this unbelievable gore take to Slaanesh to make it really messed up. No, you do not. The Night Lords are very creative in their way. The Iron Warriors are very creative in their way. Slaanesh feels like it's just a diet Drukhari at some points. And all they say is, like, pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. They're supposed to be the most creative torturers of the batch. Really, obsession should be, I feel like, a stronger point than just, oh, pleasure. Like, imagine if there was a Emperor's Children war band, and the warlord of that band really liked a admiral from the Imperial Navy. He's like, oh, you know what, this guy's really good at admiralty. He even, I would say, is a close second to me. When we shoot at each other, it's like a dance. So, every world that Emperor's Children goes to now, he erects little statues all over the planet to this admiral to show sort of a form of respect, a love letter, if it will, to that admiral, and a respect of his brilliance. Of course, that admiral is going to find himself in hot water very quickly with the Inquisition when they find out, oh, this world that was conquered by chaos has a million little statues of you making out with, you know, an Emperor's Children space marine. Good job, buddy. And the Inquisition would have to make a choice of either kill this admiral, he's clearly connected to this heretic Astartes, or is the heretic Astartes trying to trick us into killing a very valuable, very good admiral? And, you know, a sort of Yarick and Ghazghul tale. And I think there's only really two big examples of a character obsession with Slaanesh, which is one, Fulgrim with Ferris, where he keeps bringing back Ferris Manus clones, and then he keeps killing them because they don't, you know, betray the Emperor. And I think that there was the demon that's really into Caiaphas Cain that tracked him across the worlds to try to corrupt him so she could get some form of reward. Of course it was Caiaphas Cain, so it didn't work, but still a very good example of that. But really, what I'm trying to say is, I want Slaanesh to be more messed up. You don't need to write fan fiction level slop to make Slaanesh messed up. You truly can just write the starving, psychotic artist from BioShock and make a plethora of great Slaaneshi characters. Because what Slaanesh should be is a veneer of beauty covering over a decrepit and wasted away person. It's usually referred to that Slaaneshi corruption is a lot like a drug addiction, and that's great. Drug addiction is an amazing thing for showing kind of the nastier side of human emotion. It's ugly, it takes away, responsibility, it takes away self-preservation, it takes away, goals and self-actualization and replaces it with a single desire. The problem is, even Slaaneshi cultists that are left alone in like a sensory deprivation tank, they will break, but it will be like, oh, just make me feel something, oh, and they'll be getting tortured. Really, what I would love to see is just one novel where an Emperor's Children has a breakdown. Where an Emperor's Children is not able to get their fix of Fabius Bile drugs, or they're not able to indulge in the way that they thought. Like, they get abandoned on an empty moon with just air, and they just have to sit there in silence with nothing, and just Slaanesh grows bored with them and leaves them, and then they're just a crying mess on the floor, gasping for air. We don't get to see that a lot, because they're always high all the time, and we don't get to see them being down. We see Death Guard when they're cut off from the warp and the pain they ensue. It's just horrible. We see Cornate Berserkers when they're laying on the ground. I think Betrayer had a perfect example of this. The Butcher's Nails. It was the Space Marine. He was ripped in half, and he's talking to Karn as he's bleeding to death, and he's like, Karn, I don't know what these nails want. I'm cut in half. I'm dying on the ground. These are my final moments, and they still bite. They still want me to kill. They still want me to keep going. And I know that's not corruption, but that's... The Butcher's Nails are basically a preemptive cornate corruption of how it feels. What I fear, in the end, is Slaanesh won't ever get novels that portray, the Prince of Darkness correctly. I think that every author is just kind of scared of being Ian Watson with Inquisitor, so I don't think that we're going to get one that properly shows how messed up it can get. Because if I'm buying a Slaanesh novel, I should be thinking, oh, this should be messed up. But usually it's not. Usually it's just, oh, they made a chair out of people. What faction hasn't made a chair out of people? Like, seriously. I think maybe the Tau haven't, but in 40k you have such a level of kind of cruelty and creativity, and you have maybe the second most cruel faction in all of 40k being the, Slaanesh. Maybe, the Drukhari have a hand up on that, but even the Drukhari are terrified of falling into Slaanesh's hand more than they are terrified of falling into other Drukhari's hand. So it's a very weird thing when it's all, they get overshadowed by the Night Lords, they get overshadowed by the Iron Warriors, they get overshadowed by several legions in their creativity and cruelty. Like, let's put some evil thought into what should be, done. And, I'm excited to read the Fulgrim novel when it comes out. I'm still a big Emperor's Children fan, though I prefer them Loyalist over, Traitor, but I still like them the way they are. I do really like that the Emperor's Children, Noise Marines, are still kind of chilled out dudes if you get to know them. But if you don't know them, they're just screeching monsters. That's kind of a cool concept I like. But really, the Emperor's Children have lost potential, and I want them to see that they can be even more perfect. All in all we ask for is more Fabius Bile-like corruptions of perfection, where it's not all just beauty and art and the finer things of life. Slaanesh can corrupt a farmer who wants to make the most efficient farm imaginable. It is perfection. Perfection in design. Perfection in delivery, perfection in speech. An orator who wants to be able to sing the most perfect thing should be just as, corruptible as a factory manager who wants to get the perfect numbers from his employees. It's a perfection of pursuit. Because Fabius Bile is not really all into, the arts, but he is a genetic master. He makes whatever he does into an art.